The greatest lesson of success ever is that when the world is against you and everything's hard and you think you can't, you just take one more step forward. And if you would just keep moving forward, I promise you, it will get better.
Welcome to the Dwayne Kerrigan Podcast. I'm your host, Dwayne Kerrigan. And after 39 years in business, 31 ventures and 14 industries, I've learned a lot. And on this show, I sit down with exceptional entrepreneurs to unearth entrepreneurial gems, learn from their experiences, and get educated. Ladies and gentlemen, I have Brian Will on the podcast today, who is a serial entrepreneur, owned 10 companies. And please, Brian, correct me if I got any of this wrong. 10 companies, 5 industries, 3 exits with, I think, about 500 million plus in combined value. What I said to you before we got on the air was, you're a brother from another mother. Like, you struggled through high school like I did. You dropped out, you returned, graduated with a 1.2 GPA, which I'm Canadian originally, but I think 1.2 is not an awesome GPA.
Yeah, that's not good. Our class was 85 and I graduated 83. So
yeah, gotcha. And so I'm there with you. I think it took me 6 years to go through high school. So then you went into the Air Force, 18 to 21 years old. Then you got into the landscape industry.
Actually went from Air Force to Army.
Oh, to Army. Oh, okay.
Yep.
We'll talk about that today. And then owned a landscape company for almost a decade. In 96, that went down to zero, rebounded.
Failed, huge.
Yeah, good. I love talking about that stuff. I've done that many times myself. Then you kind of found a formula. You had a couple of exits in the health insurance industry for online health insurance, and then an online lead generation. Mm-hmm. Currently running a company called Living Forever AI, which is going to be an awesome conversation. And you've also written 3 books, 2 of which were like Wall Street Journal bestsellers. What's that? All
4 now.
Oh, 4 now. Okay. Is that recently brand new?
The last one came out in the last year. Yeah.
Okay. So I have Dropout Multimillionaire, Know the Psychology of Sales and Negotiations, and The Invisible Multimillionaire. Which one am I missing?
Oh, you're missing the first book. My first book is called I Give the Dumb Kids Hope.
Damn, you stole my title.
And that is my biography. That's my story.
Yeah, well, I love it. And like I said, we have not met before, so I'm really excited to have this conversation, and I'm beyond grateful for your time. I'm happy to start wherever you want to start. I mean, I love the starting at zero, coming up, then losing, then coming back up. You found a formula. I'm wherever you want to start, brother. I'm with you.
Dwayne, I appreciate you having me on the show today, and we are going to have some fun with this. It's always interesting when I hear people read the bios, because number one, I don't know that I've seen what they sent out. So it's funny they left off the first book, and since we can start anywhere, I want to start with that book. And the book is titled "I Give the Dumb Kids Hope," and the story behind it is we did really well, and my kids were going to this private school, and my daughter was fanatical about studying. And so she used to stay up most of the night studying when I would get mad at her. I'm like, Stephanie, you need to go to bed. You need to go to bed. She's like, no, I have to study. I have to get good grades so I can get into a good college, so I can get a good job. That's what she would always say. And one night about 2 a.m, I woke up and I walked out in the kitchen, and she's laying in the kitchen floor. She's got a little candle burning, and she's laying there studying whatever subject it was. And I said, what are you doing? And she says, I'm studying. And I said, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. You need to go to bed. And she's like, I can't. I still have more work to do. It's important. And I said, Stephanie, it's not that important. You need to go to bed and get a good night's sleep. And she said, Daddy, you are not supporting my educational goals. And I said, Stephanie, straight A's is not as much as it's cracked up to be. I said, look at me. We're living in the house that all your friends call the castle. I haven't worked in years. We have a beach house and a lake house and a boat and a plane and cars, and we have this amazing life, and I failed out of high school. So grades are that important. How do you explain me? And she looked up at me and she said, it's funny, Daddy, we were talking about you in school the other day. And I said, you were? And she goes, yeah, we decided you give the dumb kids hope. And I was like, that's my first book. And that's where the story came from.
Oh my
Straight
God,
out of my daughter's mouth at 2 a.m.
That is hilarious.
So I wrote the book. It's my life story. It's about overcoming, abusive childhood and failing out of high school. I got kicked out actually because I just stopped going, and then getting back in and went into the military because I got kicked out of the house and didn't have a place to lay my head. So, I hated authority, couldn't stand being told what to do, had a huge chip on my shoulder. So, of course, I joined the military.
Right, good, perfect spot for you.
Yeah, I want to be my own man. I'll never forget the first day, Dwayne, I get to basic training, and you go to bed at 9 o'clock and you're wide eyed because you don't know what's going on. You've had your hair all shaved off and you're laying in this little bunk, and you finally fall asleep at midnight. And at 4 a.m., these drill instructors come in smashing trash cans and picking your bed up and smashing it up and down. I remember waking up thinking, I have made a horrible decision. This was a mistake. And that was my introduction to the Air Force. So,
but I'm curious, when you mentioned that, what were the takeaways? Like, even maybe in the moment you didn't have them, but now reflecting back, what was the beauty in all of that?
As I said, I had zero discipline, bad attitude, didn't listen to anybody, didn't know what I wanted to do, didn't have a direction, didn't have an education, was not going to go to college. I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. I was just an angry young man. So I didn't know that, but I needed the military because I needed that discipline. I needed to get in there. I needed to be told what to do. I needed to know how to get my life straight. And that's what the military did for me. And I didn't even know it was happening when it happened. The military is right for some people. Not everybody, but it's right for some people. And it was right for me.
Yeah. But I think to that point, I know a lot of guys in the military at a lot of levels. And I don't, the one takeaway that I've always gotten from people who have spent time in the military is that it might not be right for everybody, but it's not wrong for anybody almost. Like there's always, I always get like, there's always somebody has a lesson that they learn that if they hadn't learned it, maybe their life would have taken a different course, or, they wouldn't be the person that they are. And that's always been my takeaway. And this is not a military commercial for anybody listening, but honestly, like that structure for people that they, is usually a positive thing.
One of the things I would say that carried with me for the rest of my life was, I remember in the first few weeks of basic training, a lot of us were like, I want to quit. This is too hard. And I remember a drill instructor saying, I'm sorry, you don't have a choice. You don't get to quit. You want to quit? We're going to put you in the brig. That's the deal. So you will move on no matter how hard you think it is, no matter how much it sucks, you will keep moving forward. And that has gone with me my whole life through business and things that have happened to me in my life and, personal tragedies. You just keep moving forward. I said that in a TED Talk up in University of Chicago. I said, the greatest lesson, if you talk to people who have been very successful, the greatest lesson of success ever is that when the world is against you and everything's hard and you think you can't, you just take one more step forward. And if you would just keep moving forward, I promise you, it will get better. And I think a lot of that was born out of the military because you didn't have a choice. You didn't have a choice to quit. You just kept going.
Yeah. It's funny. I had this exact coaching, like literally the exact coaching conversation 5 hours ago. I was just looking at my clock on my computer. 5 hours ago, I had this. It wasn't a coaching conversation, but I was explaining to the person that back in the days when I started my first business, my dad said to me, never, ever cry wolf. I suffered through a period of time where I probably, I should have asked for help. A smarter person would have asked for help, but I tend to be known to not be that smart. I learned things the hard way, but it was one of the best lessons that he ever instilled in me was like not only just the work ethic, that's one thing, but it's like never, ever cry wolf, never quit. But I am curious, you mentioned, and you can share or not share, I'm totally open to it. But you said you were an angry young man, and I'm just curious, for listeners out there that maybe have children, in that position, or they've been in that position or still are in that position. What was it that made you angry as a young man coming out of school? And
Sure. Yeah. I grew up in an abusive environment. And when I say abuse, I mean all kinds, from a stepfather to neighbors. Don't want to get too deep into that, but it was a very abusive home. So I grew up angry. I grew up angry at the environment I lived in, my stepfather. Honestly, I grew up angry at my mother because she allowed things to happen to me and pretending like she didn't know. And so as a child, I was very rebellious. I was very angry. I hated being told what to do because most of the time I was being yelled at or hit when I was told. Hence, when I was 16, I just stopped going to school. Um, all this is in my first book, and it's in one of my TED Talks. If anybody wants to get into the deep details of all that, they can. But let's just say it was not a good environment for a young man to grow up in. And I didn't drop out. I failed out, but I did end up getting back in. That's a whole story. I jokingly call it the first time I ever sold anything in my life was I had to sell myself to the principal to allow him to allow me to get back in school. And I did, and he did, and I ended up graduating. But then after graduation, I got kicked out of the house. And so I still had no place to go. And so that's how I ended up in the military. One of the talks I do is called Your Past is Not Your Future. And I talk about this a lot. I say, people that go through trauma or abuse as a child tend to go down one of three paths. The first path is that the abused becomes the abuser, and that's just a cliche. The second path is the abuse takes everything out of them, and they end up becoming nothing. They do nothing. They go nowhere. They just do nothing with their life. But that third path, and you see this a lot with celebrities, artists, CEOs, they're countless if you start looking at it. They take that anger and they use it as fuel. And they use that fuel to become a change agent in their own life. And they change their family history. In my case, I stopped talking to my family. I moved 1,000 miles away, eliminated them from my life, and started from scratch by myself with no help, no nothing. But that was what I needed to do, become that change agent. I call it my anger box, by the way. It's in my book. Mm-hmm. I had to learn to control that because I was hell on wheels my first few years in business. I can tell you that I knew how to destroy somebody mentally and verbally because that's how I grew up.
Right.
And so I had to learn over the years how to control that. But the flip side of that is that passion that allows you to connect so deeply with somebody that you can really get into their mind and soul also is an amazing sales tool that allows you to get other people to just move in the direction you want them to go. I had a guy that worked for me at one point. We did this big presentation to Aetna Insurance, and they left and he goes, "Oh my God, I don't know how it is. You just get people to move in the direction you want them to go. It's that anger box. You just crack it open, you let a little bit of that passion out, and that passion turns into people really locking into you." So while it's a huge negative, it also had some positive aspects of my life. But too many people don't know how to get it under control. If you get under control and you use that trauma and that pain as a driving force or a fuel, you can do amazing things. How many times have you heard a CEO or an artist say, "I grew up in an abused home"? Tyler Perry tried to commit suicide 3 times. He had friends who died. I did a whole talk on this one as well. People that go through massive trauma. Oprah Winfrey was pregnant at 13, right? And they use that fuel to power them to do things that other people will never do.
Yeah, do you mind just, I'd love to jump into the anger box if you don't mind. Like how was it that because I talk a lot on the show about, emotional homes. And so, my emotional home, I've said on the podcast before, is anger as well. And so I'm curious how you kind of, took that anger and using your language about the anger box. And what was the process that you found yourself creating over time and how it evolved? And what were some of the things that you would recommend to people that may be in that chair at this moment in their life, how they could kind of leverage themselves out of it?
I'm going to say this a couple different ways. Number one, I didn't learn how to do anything. I didn't actively learn how to do anything with it. I passively learned over a period of time what would work and what wouldn't. And that passive learning is what gave me the experience to capitalize on the way I needed it to be done and the way I didn't need it to be done. Does that make sense at all?
No, it makes total sense. I actually love the analogy of it. The
challenge you've got is most people, and I like to say the difference between people who are success and people who are failure. I'm gonna bounce over to another concept here. Have you ever heard the concept, Dwayne, that you have to fail to win? The faster you fail, the faster. You ever heard that?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yep. That's bullshit. Can I say bullshit on your show?
Sure, you can say anything you want.
Okay, that's bullshit. Failure does not lead to success. Ever, never, ever, ever. Learning from failure leads to success. And that's the thing that a lot of people don't do, especially in business. They fail, but they don't learn. We call this the post-failure analysis, even post-success analysis. It's the learning from failure that allows you to succeed at the next level. And I always tell people success is like a ladder with 100 steps, right? And some people start, they have got a college education and the right parents and they got backing and they might start at step 50 and success is 100 and it's easy for them to get there. Some people, they were okay. They got decent grades. They don't have people backing them, but they got a college education. They might start at step 10. I started at 0. I had no education, no background, no help, no mentoring, no nothing. And so I had to go through every single one of those 100 steps to figure out how to be successful. 2 things happen with people. Number 1, they get mad because they didn't get to start at 50 like the other guy did, and they don't want to have to go through and learn all those things, and so they quit. Most of the time they quit right before they're about to make a breakthrough. That's just a fact. Number 2, nobody's ever explained that to them, and there's only 2 ways for you to get from 0 to 100. One is for you to go through every single lesson by yourself and learn them, which is what I did. And number 2 is to find somebody who has already gone up that ladder, has learned those lessons, and you go and ask them for help. You ask them for advice. You talked about a coaching session earlier. Bringing somebody in who's been there and done that to help you is the only way to skip those steps without living through all that pain. And most people who are entrepreneurs, who are drivers, who are A personalities, they don't want to do it. And even if they say they want to, they won't listen. I'm sure if you've done coaching, people listen to half of what you say and then they blame you and it didn't work because, you're like, but you only did half. I told you 3 things, you did 1, and you're saying it doesn't work, right? But you're either going to learn those lessons on your own, or you're going to quit in the process, or you're going to bring somebody in to help you learn those lessons and help you skip all that pain that you're going to have. There's no question, right? So wherever you start on the ladder is where you start on the ladder. That's it. That's the hand you were dealt. It's the cards you've got. That's what you got to play with. And don't whine and cry to me about how it's not fair. I don't care. That's your lot in life. Deal with it. Mine was 0. I figured it out. But I did figure it out along the way because I learned from every single failure. If there's one thing that I am good at, it's learning from failure. And I don't make that mistake again. And so I learned the hard way. And now I have the ability, and I do coaching, consulting with clients as well. And I go in and I'll say, no, listen to me. Like I had one of my clients this morning called me and said, should I do this and this and this? And I'm like, listen, just relax. You did what you needed to do. Now let it sit for 48 hours. If you go in and jump around and you're just jumping around, making all kinds of noise, you're just going to screw up everything that we just set up. And that's what you do when you're helping somebody, but they've got to be able to listen to you. So I learned the hard way, but now I have the ability to help people learn the easy way or easier way, if that makes sense.
No, I think it makes a ton of sense. And I'm a big fan of 100% of what you're saying. It's like, I put it on the bumper sticker of, failure will be inevitable at some point, and learning is optional. And, it's up to you whether or not that's what you want to do or not. I love your strategy about mentorship. And I would just, and every time this comes up, when I have conversations with people, I love to kind of get some nuances about what you did as a younger gentleman who was looking for mentorship. What advice do you give to people when they're searching for somebody? Because a lot of them go, oh, well, nobody wants to work with me, or they're afraid to ask. And you don't necessarily have to pay for mentorship. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I've had some pretty unbelievable mentors. And I have an unbelievable mentor right now, and it's not, I don't pay him. He loves working with me because I do the stuff that needs to be done when he tells me what to do. And he's traveled the road that I'm looking to travel right now, and where we're taking our business. And so I'm curious, what was it for you as a mentoree in your strategy to find somebody? What did you look for? How did you put yourself out there? I just love to hear.
So I'm going to tell you the story. I am doing everything on my own. Like most entrepreneurs, I think I have to have all the answers. I think I need to be right about everything. I think I need to pretend like I'm right even when I'm not. That's what most young entrepreneurs do. And that's a lot of the reason why they fail.
Yeah.
And so I've gone 20 years doing things my way. And I met a guy, Steve, and long story behind Steve, but he ended up becoming a business partner of mine. We had 2 companies. He ran one company, I ran the other, and we swapped equity in our 2 companies. So I had a little bit of his equity. He had a little bit of mine. My company was performing. His company was brand new. It was an internet company. He had already done this and made millions and millions of dollars. As I like to say, Steve was worth 20 million. I was worth 20 bucks. And he started this internet company, and I was funding it with my operations. And I remember after about 9 months, my accountant came in and he said, Brian, you need to shut the internet company down. It's losing money. And you're already down $500,000. They're just burning cash. They've done zero revenue. And you owe that $500,000, by the way, because it's borrowed money. And I was freaking out. And the next day, Steve came into my office and he sat down and he's wearing, dirty tennis shoes and a white tank top and gym shorts. And I'm sitting there dressed like I'm a business guy. And he said, hey, we're going to borrow another $66,000 to buy some more servers. And I was like, Steve, what are you talking about? We are losing. We've lost $500,000. I don't want to do that. He goes, Brian, it's going to work. I'm like, no, it's not working. We've done zero revenue. I mean, zero, nothing. If you'd done $10, I might have a conversation about it, but we've done zero. He said, Brian, I'm telling you, it's going to work. I'm like, Steve, no. And he said, all right, I'll make you a deal. You give me my equity back. I'll take over all the debt. You owe me nothing. We walk away as friends. I don't want money to come between us, but I want a decision right now. And I remember, Dwayne, I was sitting there at my desk and he was sitting in this chair. And if you ever had those conversations where that ping pong ball is just back and forth in your head, and you're like, I'm in, I'm out, I'm in, I'm out, I'm in, I'm out. And I'm thinking, I can get out of this $500,000 of debt, go on with my little life, doing my little thing, selling insurance, blah, blah, blah. And then it dawned on me that he was worth 20 million and I was worth 20 bucks. Right. And so finally I said, you know what, Steve? All right, I'm in. I said, if I'm going down with you. And he said, good. Don't ever have this conversation with me again. In 60 days, we hit our first offer. We did $6 million, then 20, then 30, and then sold the company for $80 million 18 months later.
Oh, 18 months later?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a pretty good return on $66,000.
Time, our accountant had quit who had equity. Our chief marketing officer quit who had equity. Our COO quit who had equity. They all quit and I was about to, but I didn't. And I'm telling you, Dwayne, that lesson, I have a tattoo today that says I'm in, by the way, because it reminds me, sometimes you need to quit taking your own damn advice and listen to somebody who's been there and done that and knows what they're talking about. And that's a lesson that's it. That's my life lesson. I would not have anything I have today. And I was this close. I could have said I'm out and I don't know what I'd be doing today.
That's an awesome story. It's really an awesome story. Obviously, it's an awesome story. But beyond the story, the reflections, what got you to that point? So many people build their life up to a threshold in whatever area of their life, could be with their kids, their wealth, their business, their job, their whatever. But they build up to a threshold and they hit this precipice. And like you said it earlier in the conversation, that most people quit just before they're about to have a breakthrough. And I do believe that you're 100% accurate on that statement. Walk me through the courage, or I don't want to put a word in your mouth, but the courage, the vulnerability, the whatever it was, the certainty that you had to overcome to you got into the place of not being able, because you took some advice from your accountant, probably before your accountant was, said anything, you were like, yeah, we're doing okay. And we're working the plan. And then he comes and says something, cast doubt in your life. Then all of a sudden you then respond or reflect on that. And just walk me through what was the learning lessons that you take away from that, post playback.
I spent so many years trying to be the man and it wasn't working. I was making maybe $100,000 a year, but I'd spent 20 years building companies and succeeding and failing and succeeding and failing. And I think it just took that type of moment to break through that barrier in my own head that maybe I don't know everything I need to know to get where I really want to go in life. And when you're staring at somebody who's having this conversation with you, who has had that success and is telling you, get on the boat. He used to say, let's push this boat out together. We'll ride off in the sunset together. Part of me will tell you that I was lucky I made the decision, Dwayne. I'm telling you, because I could have gone either way that day. And it scares me to think of what would have happened if I'd have said, I'm out. So I don't know that it was courage. It was a little bit of luck on my part, luck that I now get to pass on to other people because I can give them that story and help them through decisions like that. I think I was tired of being tired, and I had a guy standing here telling me that we're going to be in this together, and he was more successful than me, and I just broke down and gave it to him. And from that point forward, I did everything he told me, and we had tremendous success after that.
So I just really would love to extract a little bit on these pieces, because, at one point in time in the answer you said, hey, yeah, I think there was a little bit of luck. But the other key pieces that I really want to draw for the listener is you had some type of belief, but what I really love is you surrendered. I'm using my own words to put a bumper sticker on this for people, but you surrendered to someone who has walked the path that you want to walk. And I guess maybe say, as I'm thinking this through and saying it out loud, is, it sounds to me like you surrendered your ego a little bit too. I just wrote down that you spent many years trying to be the man. And then there must have been I'm hallucinating, of course, but I'm curious, was there at some point in time in that decision where you had to make it, where it was I got to trust in somebody else. I got to follow somebody who's done this, put my friggin' ego behind me or beside me, and not be the one that has to be in control or has to be the man. Yeah. And I don't know what your definition of the man is, but I'd be curious to just explore that.
No, you hit on it exactly. And I'll give you, there's two parts to this answer. And number one is I have this other thing I talk about. It's called the 5 keys to success, which are the same 5 keys to failure. And one of those keys is, if you haven't already done it, you have no idea how to do it. And you need to check your ego and find somebody who does. Now, what that's born from in my case, if you remember my background, coming up from an abusive home life, I had no parental figure. I had no mentor figure. I had nobody to help, and I didn't trust anybody, because everybody who was ever in authority over me had burned me in my life. So in my case, there was nothing in me that trusted any human being on the face of this earth. And I think I was searching my whole life for that person that I could trust enough to actually listen to what they say. And that barrier, that bar for me was super high. And I'd been with Steve long enough and watched him. And I watched how he handled his marriage and his children and friendships. I watched him give money away to people who not only didn't deserve it, but he knew they were going to take it from him. I remember having a conversation saying, Steve, why are you giving Billy money? He's never paid you back, ever. You know he's not going to pay you back again. And Steve goes, look, if they write on my gravestone, I gave things to people who never gave it back to me, that's not a bad thing. And so I watched this man and who he was. And it was, it's just built up to the point, I think then that decision-making point, I was like, okay, this is the guy. This is my father figure. This is the guy that I can have conversations with. I can trust what he says, and I'm going to listen to him. And I think that was the mental breakthrough for me. It had to be that guy that I trusted that wasn't going to burn me.
I like it. Trust. One of the things I've been working on, and I'd love your insight on it, is that, before trust, I always feel like there's this one anchor that has to kind of show up in terms of your values, and that's vulnerability. Because like at some time, especially for somebody like you who grew up, closing yourself off because you were trying to protect yourself from the harm that you received when you were young, and obviously you don't understand it and you don't know how to figure it out. Where does that fall for you in terms of like vulnerability, which then allows you to open up to courage to then be able to trust?
I don't have an answer for that, as in, these are the 3 things you have to do. In my case, I had to be around the man for a couple of years and watched how he was as a human being in order for me to trust him, which then led to the vulnerability. Prior to that, there was no vulnerability to anyone ever, not even my wife. As I like to say, my marriage was a product of entrepreneurial divorce. I worked 7 days a week, dark to dark. I was more interested in business than I was in my marriage, because I was trying to succeed and create a life and success and wealth It was more important to me to prove to everybody in my past that I was not that loser that they thought I was. It was important for me to be able to show that I won the game of life and that everybody else didn't win over me. Honestly, that's that driving force. That's that anger driving force, right? I'm an entrepreneur. I have to win because I have to be better than other people, because other people made fun of me and failed me in high school and repossessed my car and laughed at me. And, I had to prove something. So there's no vulnerability. You're just hell on wheels when you're in that stage. I did counseling when I got divorced for about 3 years. And it was during that time where you come back and you realize that all those people you think you're trying to prove something to hadn't thought about you in years. Couldn't give a crap about you. Don't know anything you're doing, right? And they're struggling with their own problems in life. And one of the only person that still thinks, or in my case, still thought that I was that, kid laying in the yard crying after I got beat up by my stepdad was me. I was the guy that I had to prove something to. I was the guy that I had to prove that I wasn't a loser. I was the only one that needed proof. And the only way I was ever going to get that was by succeeding and being successful and having money and having things, unfortunately. And that drive was so powerful in me that it overcame and overrode everything else, which is what caused my divorce, unfortunately. These are things you don't know until you can look back at them, right? And see, you can start connecting the dots and maybe have somebody help show you those things. But unfortunately, sometimes entrepreneurs never get through that. They never have the amount of success needed for them to stop needing to prove to themselves or the world that, they aren't this person that they think they actually are, if I'm making any sense at all.
Yeah.
And they go through their whole lives struggling and their whole lives angry, and they never get the things in life they want to get.
Yeah,
and once again, I think I was fortunate that I figured that out and that we did have some success. And the only reason I have that success was because of Steve.
Yeah, it's that you're proving you're worthy, right? And the whole concept that you were just explaining about being worthy and about success and how the reality of it being only really important to you, and you're not as important to other people as you think you are. I like what did my dad used to say? Like, my dad, somebody would say to him like, "Oh, he's successful guy." He's like, "Well, successful in my own mind." Like he's like, it's only in my own mind, right? But I'm curious, with hindsight being 2020, what is true? What have you realized to be true, and what advice would you give to somebody so they don't have to live what you lived through, a divorce, for example, and having to feel that pain? I've walked this path myself, and so I'm curious what your take is on it, of reflecting back and going, if you had known then what you know now, how would you explain it to someone that it's not true, that you need to have a certain amount of money in the bank or have accomplished this kind of exit or that kind of business thing?
See, that's the problem, Dwayne. You can't explain that to somebody in that frame of mind because they're not going to listen to you. I would have not listened to anybody.
No, but I'm curious.
My younger self, it's going to be okay, Brian. And my younger self will be like, "Oh, okay, that sounds good. Then I'll just stop."
Yeah, that's why I want to hear your story of it to yourself, because one of the things that got me to start this podcast was because I actually, to your exact point there, is I don't think you can tell anybody, what to do to overcome something or get through something. But what I do believe, and I don't really have any scientific proof on this other than, my lived experience and the lived experience of others that I've seen, is that oftentimes we learn through story. And this, you could go back to the Bible for this. You could go back to any culture in the past. Is like stories were shared over generations and generations to help them understand certain life lessons. And that's why I love having guys like you on the podcast, because you can share your story. And so if you were even to give yourself the advice, what would it look like that you would, you reflect back on?
I would say one of the most important things that I did growing up, and when I say growing up, I mean from about the age of 18 through the age of 40. And again, I don't know why I did this, but I took a really, really strong interest in self-help books and business books. You know, the old adage is that the difference between you today and you 5 years from now is going to be the people you associate with, the books you read. And today we say the podcast you listen to, right? Because you need to drown your mind in whatever it is you want to do. And that includes mental mindset stuff to overcome all the things that are already in your mind that are keeping you from doing whatever it is that you want to do in life. I don't know if I said that very cleanly, but I've read hundreds of books, and I jokingly, they're all on my bookshelf in my living room, and I jokingly call it my brain. That's my brain up there. And if I've written 4 books now. I got another one we're working on. My books are a combination of everything I've ever read. Everything I'm telling you right now is a combination of everything I've put in my head. And I needed that because I went from such negative to I read my first PMA book, and it was probably How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I thought, oh my God, this is incredible. And then, Master Key to Riches. Oh my God, this is incredible stuff. And Andrew Carnegie. And I was like, I couldn't get enough. And what I was doing that I didn't know I was doing was trying to overcome all the negative in my brain by just overloading it with positive stuff. And I've got like 5 copies of Master Key to Riches in my library. And also another one is the E-Myth Revisited. That's one of my favorite basic physics books. And I'll tell people, if you're a young entrepreneur, read this. Blink is one of my favorite books. The E-Myth is one of my favorite books. Rich Dad, Poor Dad is one of my favorite books. So I've got all these favorites that I think that every young entrepreneur ought to read because they need to drown out everything they think they know with stuff that's actually good.
I'm going to actually go back and just ask some lighter questions. I'm curious about Steve. Was Steve older than you?
Steve's probably about 10 years older than me. He passed away a couple years ago from COVID. Steve's the guy that went to University of Georgia, UGA, dropped out of college 2 semesters short of graduation and opened a bar instead. And that's just Steve's personality was just fun Steve. And then he gets into business years later, and much like me, he would fail, and then got into the internet very early and started doing performance marketing or paper performance marketing and had a tremendous amount of success, and then sold that company and went on to start the next company with us. So it wasn't like he was a highly educated guy. He wasn't. He was just a good old boy, but he had been there and done that in a lot of different ways, and he was a good man. So he will always be my first and most important mentor.
One of the distinctions I wanted to actually clarify, because when you were telling the story, so the swapping of equity is a really, really interesting concept. And people out there listening who are in this position where, they have a connection, however you want to draw it as a listener, what you could do. But that swapping of equity is outside the box idea that I actually can't recall I've heard of. But that's a really interesting idea.
All right, let me give you the story.
Yeah.
So Steve is I had 3 offices in my insurance agency, and I wanted to close one of them. And I'm trying to find the person who owns the building, so I want to cancel my lease. I call. Nobody ever returns my calls. Finally, one day, I just walked over to the building where I knew they were. I walked in the front door, started going down the hallway, looking at people's offices going, hey, where's the Steve guy? Where's the Steve guy? And finally, somebody goes, excuse me, what are you doing here? And I'm like, I'm trying to find this Steve guy. And they're like, why? And I said, well, I have this company that sells insurance online, but I need to move my office. And he goes, well, we're an online marketing company. Tell me about your product. I told him, and he goes, you need to meet Steve. And I'm like,
no shit.
No shit. I've been trying to find Steve for a month. So we walked over to Steve's office. I walked in. He's like, hey, man, how you doing? I'm Steve. And I'm like, we struck up a conversation. And pretty soon he's like, we want to buy your online insurance agency because it's a great fit for what we do. So Steve and I work out the deal. And Steve's just the nicest guy I've ever met. And we go out and have drinks. And we finally get it out. And we hug it out. That's Steve. He wants to hug it out. We hug out the agreement, and we're going to do it the next day. Next day, I show up to the office. I walk over to his building. There's a security guard at the door, and they're like, Steve doesn't work here anymore. I said, Steve's the president of the company. What do you mean he doesn't work here anymore? And they're like, Steve's no longer the president of the company. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? Like literally yesterday, we hugged it out. So I called him. I'm like, what's up? And he said, my two business partners are suing me and they want me out of the company. And they got in cahoots with our lawyer. And so they've kicked me out of the company. And now we're suing each other. And I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. He goes, so I can't do this deal with you. I'm like, all right, well, just let me know what's going on. The other partners call me that same day. I'm driving home from work. I get a call from this other partner. He goes, hey, we still want to do this deal with you. And I said, no, I'm out. I said, if Steve's not in the deal, Steve's my guy. I'm not doing a deal with you. I'll never forget this guy. His name was John. He said, Brian, you're making a life-changing decision here. You need to do a deal with us. And I said, John, Steve's out. I'm out. And that was the last time I ever talked to them. And it was a year later, Steve called me and he said, I sued them. I won. I've been paid. Now I want to start another company. I'm going to give you equity in my new company. I appreciate your loyalty.
Wow.
And I said, okay, let's do it. So that's how the little equity swap happened.
Right. And then, so you guys then borrow this money, like, cause he's got 20 large.
He put the money in, but I owed it.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, got it. Okay. So I got it. Okay.
So whichever, so he puts the money in,
got it.
But whichever company succeeds pays back them. So if the new company failed, I owe the money.
Yep.
Out of my current company. If the new company succeeds, it'll pay the money back. And if you recall the story, after 9 months, they had done zero revenue, and I'm looking at owing $566,000, and I was freaking out.
Well, what year was that, by the way? Was that
That was 2001.
Yeah.
No,
like that, it's funny. So it's funny. Like I've got a buddy a really close friend that's done a few startups, like in the online industry, if you will, when it was first kind of sparking up in the e-commerce, I guess is the word I was looking for. And it's amazing. Like for years, I just didn't understand, like, how can you guys continue to raise money, making no profit with zero cash flow and then just keep raising millions after millions after millions. Like it took me forever to understand the concept. And I mean, we never raised money. We were massively profitable. But we were email marketing before canned spam. So to put that in perspective, before we sold the company, we were dropping 200 million emails a day. Oh, wow. And selling our email list, which was about 80 million large, to another company who was dropping another 200 million. Oh,
so you can't do that today.
No.
But we would process 10 to 15,000 credit applications a day, and we were making, anywhere from $8 to $12 an application.
Holy smokes!
So we were making just insane money
with no debt. Congratulations.
Yeah. And I almost said no. That's how close it was.
It's a tribute to your risk profile, who you are as a person, your trust and loyalty. And Steve, I mean, these are all the kinds of things that, I say to people, and I hope, sometimes we have to say things over and over and over again for people to understand, but business is about relationships. It's not always about the best strategy or the best product or the best marketing or what you're doing with AI or any of that stuff. But, what we do, and this is, like human connection rises above all things, I believe. And
100%.
And so like, to me, it's just, the faith and like you said it. It's like, if I'm going to go down, I'm going down with you.
Yep. I mean, I count myself lucky to have met Steve. That's just the deal. So I did a lot of things. I failed a lot. I've learned a lot, but you still, what's the definition of luck? When preparation meets opportunity. I was prepared when I met Steve, and that's why it worked.
Yeah.
If I hadn't prepared for that, it wouldn't have worked.
I think you're making a good point for the listeners to take away on that. Is like, when we talked about failure earlier and learning from failure, it's like all those things serve a purpose to get you to a place of where you need to be at that time when things happen.
So in my first book, we call this your personal filter. And I asked a question, Dwayne, have you ever met somebody that seems like everything they do seems to work? Like they just have this magic touch. And do you know anybody who everything they do seems to fail? Like they just can't get a break. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is because everything that's ever gone into your head from the time you were born and your parents and you into elementary school and your friends And then your friends got all their stuff from their teachers and friends and your teachers. And when you're in high school, it's your teachers telling you things and the peer pressure. And then you go to college, your professors tell you things. And then you get a job and your boss is telling you things. You get a wife and she's always right? Because we can't, that's just the way that is. Everything you've ever done, everything you've ever heard, every book you've ever read, every person you've associated with, every podcast you listen to goes into your head. And it creates a filter. And it's a subconscious filter. It's behind your active thinking. And every new piece of information that comes into you gets filtered through that personal filter. And that filter either accepts or rejects whatever that information is, just like that. Or as Malcolm Gladwell says, in a blink. Everything gets accepted or rejected in a blink. And you base every decision you've made on a filter. In my case, it's 60 years old and who knows what all kinds of stuff is in there, right? The reason people succeed is because when information comes at that filter, if they've had a successful past or have done something successful to the point that they've learned, their brain accepts the successful information and makes decisions based on it. If they've never had success, the brain doesn't know how to make a correct, successful decision, so it can only guess. And if it's guessing, chances are a lot of times it's wrong. That's why when people seem to have the Midas touch, it's because they've had so many successes that their brain understands success. And people who fail have never had success and they're just guessing. And so we're back to those lessons, those 100 steps, right? If you haven't learned steps 1 through 20, then every decision you make is a guess. But if you've learned lessons 1 through 20 out of 100, then the decisions you're making are based on that experience. And that experience is going to make you successful or it's going to make you fail. So you're either going to have to learn and create a success filter, or you're going to have to bring somebody else in who has a success filter who can tell you that won't work. Don't do that. That's a mistake. Here's what's going to happen, because they have that success filter, because they have that experience, because they have done it before. Does that make sense? It's your success. It's your personal filter that will determine whether you succeed or fail in life. So we're back to opportunity meets preparation. The preparation is learning everything you can learn, drowning your brain in books and podcasts, hanging out with people who've been successful, finding somebody who's willing to mentor you and help you. Drown all the negative or all the failure in your brain with success and positive. And I promise you, you'll start to make successful decisions and you'll be prepared when that opportunity comes around.
Love this. Love this. 2 big takeaways in that conversation is success filter. And, the 2 ways to create a success filter is bring somebody on board, whether it's a mentor, whether it's somebody who's lived that, a partner, whatever that needs to look like, that has the success filter you're looking for. But the other one, which I really love the language around it, Jim Rohn used to say, stand guard at the gate of your mind, feed it. But what I love about what you're saying, and I love the word, because I really am big on, powerful words, and drown your mind. Yeah. You're not just filling the cup, you're drowning your mind. And I think that it is such an understated commodity of learning and being a learner and reading, but drowning your mind is a powerful phrase. I love it.
Think about this. Let's say I want to learn French. Which way is going to be more successful? Me reading about French or going over and living in France? Because you're drowning your mind in the French language. It's just it's immersion. And immersion is a powerful thing that most people just don't understand. You've got to just pound it in there.
I love the point. It's so awesome. You earlier said you had 5 keys to success, and you insinuated, I think I heard you say, those 5 keys of success are also the keys to failure. Mm-hmm. Do you mind sharing those 5 with us? I'd love to. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in for that conversation. The follow-up will happen next week. We appreciate you guys listening. I hope that it's, my hope that we bring a perspective and shared story that helps you grow and build awareness to the areas of life that you want to improve. That's the mission. And, progress is where we meet happiness. And so keep growing, keep living, keep dreaming. Appreciate you guys listening. Thanks for listening. I appreciate you being with us. If you found value in the show and know a friend or coworker who could benefit from this conversation, please share the link. Remember, each share creates a ripple effect of knowledge and inspiration. And if this podcast has supported you in any way, please support us by clicking the follow or subscribe button.